talk to us a little bit about if we have an inner child, and I think in some regard we all do, we have parts of us that need to be reparented, that need to understand love and value and acceptance in a new way. And so if that's true, then there's a part of us that's been wounded or hurt. And so unpack a little more, where does that inner child come from? What are some of the ways that the inner child in us gets wounded and damaged? And how early in life does some of this start?
Yeah, it can happen extremely early in life. And it can go throughout even into our teen years. And basically, most of the time, it's based on traumas, again, physical, you know, sexual, mental, emotional, many different things. Could happen because of people, could happen because of circumstances, could be neglect, and not neglect in the sense that, oh, somebody didn't feed me or clothe me or put a roof over my head, but more of emotional neglect. They weren't there to be able to give me the praise I needed, to notice me when I needed it, or just to help me, most importantly, deal with this emotional pain and distress that I have. My inner child is locked in a time warp. He is back there wherever that those pains came from. And and he's very afraid. And the reason he's afraid because he doesn't know how to handle this emotional distress. There was no adult in the room to be able to walk him through it. So therefore, with that, he had to come up with a solution. What am I going to do with this distress? What do I do with the bully next door? What do I do with the fact that, oh my gosh, I broke this toy that cost my parents a lot of money, and then when they find out, they're gonna, I'm gonna be in big trouble. What do I do with the fact that, oh, I get teased because, you know what, my teeth are crooked or my clothes aren't as good as everybody else, and there's nobody here to help me with it because if you go to them, you get, hey, I wouldn't worry about it. It's no big deal. Look, I don't have the time, or you know what, you don't know what you're talking about. Get out of my face, whatever it may be. What is the solution? Well, this kid doesn't have a lot of worldly experiences. He also more emotionally based in thinking than he is cognitively based. So he comes up with one solution, and it's brilliant. It's brilliant for a kid that age. I won't think about it. I won't think about it. Well, how did he do that? He distracts himself. Too much food, too much television, maybe too much fantasy in his own head, not sexual fantasy, just fantasy in general. And then we move into our adolescent, our teen years, our adult years, and what we do is we change out the behavior. And at some point, the men that we are working with stumble across sex and they say, oh my gosh, this is the mother of all distraction. This one right here, this can keep me distracted 24/7. So whenever your child gets activated, there you're going to go. You're going to run away just like you did when you were in your younger years.
One of the things I've just recently heard, I'm going through a book and a program called Positive Intelligence, and the author talks about how his dad growing up was very abusive, verbally, physically, and it's interesting. He describes it this way: how his brain was pursuing safety was that in order to constantly feel safe, he had to like rationalize in his brain that his dad is safe. There must be something wrong with me. Because if there isn't something wrong with me, then this primary caregiver of mine is not safe and I can't live in that environment. And so it's fascinating to me how often that happens to us, where it's not even what is going on, it's how we process that at such a young age that then sets a trajectory, that we don't realize can be so destructive and damaging. But I just think it's fascinating. And I feel like the reason why I'm saying that is just to make sense that it's maybe not these terrible things that are happening to you, but it is how you internalize that and process that at that young age that maybe sets you up for unhealthy behaviors.
Again, what you're talking about is children being egocentric. Okay. Therefore, whatever happens, it is because of me. It's centered around me as a child. And so therefore, and you're right, if I try to paint my parent as bad, wait a second, I need that parent. Who's going to take care of me then? Who's going to feed me? So therefore, I have to instead turn it inward. And now we have the development of low self-worth, of all those negative narratives that we carry on with us into our teen and adult world.
Yeah, when I like the phrase you used, Eddie, you call it, we're time warped into a spot. And we know that from brain research as well, that when these kind of things happen to us in our formative years, our brain that is not fully developed, that is a childish brain, computes it as being necessary for survival. And what we have to do to survive, the brain holds on to because it doesn't want to forget those things. And that's where, in a very literal sense, we might be stuck in a memory of being 5 years old because our brain has identified, this is what I do to protect myself from that fear. And we can be 35 or 55 or 75 and still responding out of that same place because there is a time warp. We're stuck there. And until we understand it, can, through an adult brain and with the help of a loving community, go back with others and understand where the message came from, what truth and reality was, where God was at, we may be stuck in that moment for a lifetime. And as I've shared on the brain in our seminars, it's like to remind people, this is the beauty of God's design in the brain, that we needed God to design our brains to remember things that are associated with survival. But because we grow up in a sinful and fallen world, we calculate all kinds of things as being necessary for survival that really aren't about our physical survival, but are about creating that emotional safety that you're talking about, Eddie.
Let's add another component to all of that. What if we have repressed that memory? Okay, so now we're still going to get triggered. There are triggers that are going to happen that are going to bring forth that, but we will not be conscious of what it is. So now we are afraid or uncomfortable about something, and we don't really even quite understand what it is. And over time, if we continue using what the inner child does, that mechanism, that coping strategy of, well, you know what? I don't want to sit with this distress. I'm just going to run. That's where we go. And how many guys will run, do something, from with the addiction, and then later sit there and say, what was that about? What in the world led me to go and do that? I never thought I was going to do that again, but yet here I am one more time.